I love fuzz. If you said it right, it is one of the most effective ways to melt faces in the audience. To quote Mr. Miyagi,
If do right, no can defense.
hey, I'm Eric Haugen. Check the description box below for tabs and backing tracks on my website, information about exactly what sound tools I'm using today, live Q&A seminars and more on Patreon, and my deep dive courses. It's all on my website. Before we get into some playing strategies, I want to clear up some areas of potential confusion. Distortion is the catch-all term for what happens when you f up your guitar sound. Now, it came to mean something else in the world of pedals, and we'll get to that later. So here's how it works. Back in the 40s and 50s, the guitar amps weren't really designed for high volume or high gain or anything like that. So if you turned the amp up past a reasonable point, you got some of the early rock and roll sounds. Additionally, some of the early distortion sounds could be achieved by damaging your amp by poking holes in the speaker or slicing it with a razor blade. Kinks did this, Link Ray did this. Now, obviously, it's not great to damage your speaker or amplifier to get a sound. So in 1962, Maestro introduced the first fuzz pedal, the FZ1 Fuzztone, which used 3 germanium transistors to get that same sound of an amp that is breaking without breaking the amp. Most notably, we can hear this on Rolling Stone's Satisfaction. So this is really interesting. I tend to think of fuzz as a big psychedelic Jimmy Page, Jimi Hendrix effect, but actually it started much before that as a rockabilly effect. So let me grab a hollow body with some flat wounds and show you what I mean. I'm using an Acid Guitar Electronics fuzz face today, which, the fuzz face is a 2 germanium transistor circuit that I think came on the scene in '65, but it's similar enough for our purposes today. I'm going to leave the fuzz all the way up. That's massive sounding, but, I'm going to cut that volume down to about 6. And you have the Link Ray rumble sound. But also, okay, what about some Chuck Berry too? Transistor-based fuzzes can be kind of harsh, so by the mid-70s, engineers had found a way to use IC chips to mess with the waveforms in a slightly more mellow way, and so you have things like the Boss OD1. Closely followed by, of course, the Ibanez Tube Screamer and countless other derivations thereof. These newer circuits allowed for more polyphonic clarity and dynamic control. Now, a distortion pedal like the Proco Rat or the Boss DS1, it uses an IC chip just like an overdrive pedal, so it's 1970s technology, but it has hard clipping diodes in it as opposed to soft clipping. You can think of it this way. Distortion is the effect, and in terms of like grittiness, it goes overdrive, distortion, fuzz. Generally. There are 2 significant limitations to what a fuzz does that affect how we work with it. One, you kind of do have limited dynamic control, as in it's more like a Hammond organ. Like, it doesn't really care how hard I pick the note. If I pick softer, I get the same amount of fuzz. You know what I mean? It's really like low, medium, high. overdrive has a more gradual and adaptive response. So that does affect how you work with the fuzz. Like, you don't need to dig in really hard because it's not going to make that much of a difference. The other thing is potentially unwanted harmonic dissonances when playing, chords. Generally, power chords will sound great. Fourths, octaves. But some of those smaller intervals may or may not sound good to your ear because of the frequencies that are getting added with the distortion. Like, I don't know, like sixth, minor sixth. You let that, again, there are no rules, but generally, if I'm playing with a fuzz, I'm going to be doing a single note thing. Or I'm going to be riffing, But watch, let's see about that D sus4 in this with the fuzz. Jane's Addiction, Mountain Song. I always say with a fuzz pedal, just turn the fuzz all the way up. It's kind of interesting. We are used to with an overdrive pedal, when you turn the gain all the way up, you tend to get a lot more noise, but with a fuzz, it's not significantly more noise either way, and I really want to soak that transistor with all the voltage so I get all the sustain. Definitely make sure that your fuzz has a good boost from your clean or clean-ish signal. Because of the sort of syrupy, round attack of a fuzz, it can get lost in the mix if you're not careful. Sometimes I like to do this. I like to use the tape compression side of the Strymon Deco after a fuzz. What that does is it kind of tames the spikiest transients and sort of also brings up the low end a little bit more. It's good sound. The main advice I have for working with a fuzz is to embrace the slow burn. That long sustain is what makes a fuzz cool. So don't feel the need to try and... You know me, I'm always going to say, don't feel the need to put more notes in. Let the audience hear what you're working with. Okay, these are really just diagonal pentatonics. Let's look at the E, diagonal, minor pentatonic. I just love those scales that kind of go across the fretboard that way. If you're not using those a lot, you should. You know who used this one? I'm playing an SG today, Tony Iommi. Good example of a riff that's based off of the E minor diagonal pentatonic Mississippi Queen. That was E diagonal minor pentatonic. Let's check out E diagonal major pentatonic. That's a fun one too. Similarly, Mississippi Queen. A little bit of minor pentatonic there, but of course, yeah, we could take it up the octave. It's true, some songs might be too chill, too mellow, too folky for Fuzz. However, there are ways to work with Fuzz that aren't so like, yeah! David Gilmour, he's so good at this. Like in Dogs, he runs a phaser into a fuzz and then has delay. He double tracked it in harmony to create that kind of, I don't know what to call it. It's a beautiful sound. And it's true, some amps don't take fuzz particularly well. Generally, amps that don't have a way to kind of tame the brightness aren't going to work well with a fuzz because a fuzz has some harsh transient spikes there. So like generally like one of the most notorious like kind of bright amps that I love this amp, the Fender Deluxe Reverb Input 1 has that bright cap on it. With the wrong fuzz in that, you might be like, oh, that's just brutal on my ear. Vox Top Boost channels, those are pretty bright also. So you need to be a little bit more careful about how you work with those. Hence why I'm using what I'm using today. That's like a brown panel Fender Deluxe circuit and a closed back British style 2x12 cabinet. So I got a lot more thickness going on than a Pine open back cabinet that gives me like, yeah, gives me some real mass behind the notes. But yeah, like I said, the Strymon Deco also is really helpful for taming any dangerous transient spikes. Something to watch out for. For folks who are the only guitar player in a band, fuzz with delay is a really useful trick for the solo section because I know what it is to be in power trios. I've been in my share of power trio situations. Riffing. You go to take a solo, the bottom drops out. If you have fuzz and delay kick in that moment, that mass and that swell will make up for the fact that your riffing is no longer going on. Here, I'll cut to one of my tracks where I utilize this. I hope this video was interesting and helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and share. That stuff costs you nothing and helps me out a lot. One more time, how my business works. Patreon is where there's every backing track I've ever made, live Q&A seminars, and more. I update that every week, and I make courses. You can check it all out on my website. As Bill and Ted would say, be excellent to each other. That includes yourself. Happy Friday. Eat pizza.